Something unexpected just happened, and it's got the entire WNBA paying attention. During a recent appearance connected to the iconic NBA on NBC, Caitlin Clark didn't just show up. She sent a message, a strong one. Fans are calling it a warning. Analysts are calling it confidence. And players around the league, they're definitely noticing. Because this wasn't just another interview. It was a statement about where she stands and where she believes the game is going. After everything, the hype, the pressure, the competition, Clark is making it clear. She's not backing down, she's not slowing down, and she's ready for everything that comes next. So, what exactly did she say? And why is it being seen as a warning to the entire league? Let's break it all down. When Caitlin Clark stepped into the spotlight of the NBA on NBC segment, it wasn't just another media appearance. It felt different from the start. The energy, the attention, the way the conversation was framed. Everything pointed to something bigger than a routine interview. Because at this stage in her career, Clark isn't just being asked questions. She's being positioned as a central figure in the evolution of women's basketball. And moments like this are where that positioning becomes visible. From the moment she started speaking, there was a clear tone. Confidence. Not arrogance, not overstatement, just belief. The kind of belief that comes from knowing exactly what you bring to the game. And that's what caught people's attention immediately, because this wasn't a player trying to prove herself anymore. This was a player who already understands her impact and is ready to embrace it. And as the conversation unfolded, Clark touched on competition, expectations, and the challenges of stepping into a league that's already filled with elite talent. But what stood out wasn't just what she said, it was how she said it. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, just clarity. She acknowledged the physicality of the league, the intensity of matchups, the reality that every game is a battle. But instead of framing it as something overwhelming, she framed it as something she welcomes. And that's where the warning narrative started to take shape. Because when a player openly embraces pressure, it sends a message, not just to fans, but to competitors. It says, I know what's coming, and I'm ready for it. And in a league like the WNBA, where competition is already at a high level, that kind of mindset stands out. Because most players respect the grind, they respect the challenge. But not everyone openly leans into it the way Clark did in that moment, and that's why people started paying closer attention. Because this wasn't just confidence, it was intent. Intent to compete at the highest level, intent to handle the spotlight, intent to continue building on everything that has already made her one of the most talked about players in the game. At the same time, the setting itself added to the moment. Being featured in a space traditionally associated with the NBA, one of the biggest sports platforms in the world, carried weight. It signaled something important, that women's basketball isn't just growing, it's being integrated into larger conversations, into mainstream sports culture. And Caitlin Clark is at the center of that integration, which makes every word she says even more impactful, because when you're speaking on a stage like that, you're not just representing yourself, you're representing the league, the future, the direction the game is heading. And Clark handled that moment with a level of composure that reinforced why she's in that position. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while her words were focused on competition and growth, the way they were interpreted went beyond that. Fans didn't just hear confidence, they heard challenge. They heard a signal that she's ready to take on anyone, any team, any player. And that interpretation quickly spread. Clips from the appearance started circulating online. Short segments, key quotes, moments that captured her tone and delivery. And as those clips spread, so did the narrative. Caitlin Clark is sending a message. A warning to the league. She's coming for everything. Now, whether that was her exact intention or not, didn't matter at that point, because perception had already taken over. And in modern sports, perception can be just as powerful as reality. Meanwhile, players around the league are watching, maybe not reacting publicly, but definitely paying attention, because when a player steps into that kind of spotlight and speaks with that level of confidence, it doesn't go unnoticed. It adds another layer to competition, another layer to future matchups, another layer to how games are approached. Because now it's not just about playing against Caitlin Clark, it's about responding to the narrative around her. And that's what makes this moment so important, because it's not just about one appearance. when it's about what that appearance represents. A shift, a signal, a moment where a player fully steps into her role as one of the faces of the game. And once that happens, everything changes. Because now, every game she plays, every matchup she's part of, every performance she delivers will be viewed through that lens. The lens of expectation, the lens of attention, the lens of a player who just told the league, "I'm ready." After the clip from the NBA on NBC appearance started circulating, the reaction wasn't just strong, it was immediate. Within hours, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. Fans weren't just sharing what Caitlin Clark said, they were interpreting it, breaking it down, turning it into something bigger. Because in today's sports culture, a statement doesn't stay a statement. It becomes a storyline. And this one? It was too powerful to ignore. Some fans saw it as pure confidence, the kind every elite athlete needs to succeed at the highest level. They praised her mindset. They pointed out that greatness requires belief, that stepping into the spotlight without fear is exactly what separates good players from game changers. From that perspective, Clark's words weren't a warning. They were a declaration that she's ready to lead, compete, and elevate the game. But not everyone saw it that way, because on the other side of the conversation, some fans and analysts viewed it differently. They saw it as bold, very bold. And in a league like the WNBA, filled with experienced veterans, physical defenders, and established stars, bold statements don't go unnoticed. They get remembered. And more importantly, they get responded to. Because competition in the WNBA isn't just about skill, it's about pride, about proving yourself every single night, about earning respect, not through words but through performance. So when a player steps into the spotlight and speaks with that level of confidence, it naturally creates a reaction, even if that reaction isn't immediately visible. Because players don't always respond publicly. Sometimes they respond on the court, through defense, through intensity, through effort that goes beyond the normal level. And that's where this situation starts to build real tension. Because now, it's not just about what Clark said, it's about how the league responds. And that response could come in many forms. More physical matchups, more aggressive defense, more focus when teams prepare to face her. And because when a player becomes the center of attention, they also become the primary target. Not in a negative way, but in a competitive one. Everyone wants to test them. Everyone wants to challenge them. Everyone wants to see if they can live up to the narrative. And that's exactly what Clark is stepping into now. A new phase, where the spotlight is brighter and the competition feels even more intense. At the same time, this moment also highlights something bigger about modern basketball, the power of visibility. Because years ago, a statement like this might have stayed within the interview, seen by a limited audience, discussed briefly, then forgotten. But now, every word spreads instantly. Every clip reaches millions. Every reaction multiplies. And that changes everything. Because it means players are no longer just competing on the court, they're competing in the narrative space as well. How they're perceived, how they're talked about, how their words are interpreted. All of that becomes part of their identity. And Caitlin Clark understands that. That's what makes this moment even more interesting, because her confidence wasn't accidental. It wasn't random. It was intentional, a reflection of where she sees herself in the game and where she believes she's going. But here's the key point. Confidence creates expectations, big ones. Because once you tell the world you're ready, the world starts watching to see if it's true. Every game becomes a test. Every performance becomes a statement. Every mistake becomes part of the conversation. And that's the pressure of being in this position. But it's also the opportunity, because players who thrive under that kind of pressure become something more than just athletes. They become faces of the sport. And that's exactly where Clark is heading. Meanwhile, fans are fully engaged. Debates are everywhere. Is she ready for this level of competition? Will the league respond physically? Can she maintain this level of confidence over an entire season? These questions are driving conversation. And that conversation is fueling interest. Because people don't just want to watch anymore. They want to see what happens next. How the story unfolds. How the league reacts. How Clark performs under the weight of everything she just said. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because it's not just about a statement. It's about what that statement sets in motion. A chain reaction. Across players, across teams, across the entire league. And as that reaction builds, one thing becomes clear. The next phase of this story won't be told through interviews. It will be told on the court, where words don't matter. Only performance does. Now that the message is out there, everything shifts, because once a player like Caitlin Clark makes a statement that's strong, whether intentional or not, the league doesn't just hear it, it reacts to it. And that reaction doesn't always come in interviews or press conferences. It comes where it matters most, on the court. This is where the real test begins, because confidence is one thing, but backing it up against elite competition night after night, that's something else entirely. And the WNBA is filled with players who have built their careers on exactly that, proving themselves through performance. Veterans who've seen everything. Defenders who specialize in shutting down top scorers. Teams that know how to game plan against high-profile players. And now, Clark is stepping directly into that environment, with the spotlight brighter than ever. Which means one thing: she's no longer just another player. She's the player everyone is watching. And when that happens, the intensity changes. Defenders become more focused. They study tendencies more closely. They apply pressure earlier. They challenge every movement, every shot, every decision. Because guarding a player like Clark isn't just about stopping points. It's about sending a message that says, this is our league. Oh, you have to earn everything here. And that's where things get really interesting. Because now, every matchup becomes personal, not in a negative way, but in a competitive one. Every defender wants to test her. Every team wants to slow her down. Every game becomes an opportunity to prove something. And that creates a different level of basketball, a faster pace, a more physical tone, a higher level of intensity across the board. But here's the other side of that equation. Because while the league adjusts to her presence, Clark also has to adjust to the league. And that's not always easy. The WNBA is a different level. Stronger players, faster decision-making, less room for error. And adapting to that environment takes time, even for the most talented athletes. So now, the question becomes, can she maintain that same confidence while going through that adjustment? Because confidence is easy when things are going well. But what happens when shots don't fall, defenders lock in, teams start targeting specific weaknesses? That's when true growth happens. And that's what this next phase is all about. Not just proving that she belongs, but proving that she can evolve, that she can adjust, that she can take everything the league throws at her and still deliver. Meanwhile, fans are watching every moment closely, not just the highlights, but everything. Every possession, every decision, every reaction. Because once a player makes a statement like this, the expectations change. People aren't just watching to enjoy the game anymore. They're watching to evaluate, to see if the performance matches the narrative. And that creates pressure, but it also creates opportunity. Because players who rise in those moments become something bigger than just athletes. They become leaders, faces of the game, symbols of a new era. And that's exactly what Clark is stepping toward. But she's not alone in this process. Because as her spotlight grows, so does the attention on everyone around her. Teammates, opponents, rising stars across the league. Everyone becomes part of the story. Because when one player draws attention, it spreads. It elevates the entire environment. And that's what makes this moment so important. Because it's not just about one player making a statement, it's about how that statement changes the energy of the entire league. More intensity, more competition, more engagement from fans and media alike. And that's how sports grow, through moments that spark something bigger. But here's where it all comes together. Because at the end of the day, narratives can only go so far. Eventually, everything comes back to performance. Wins, stats, impact. That's what defines players in the long run. And that's what will define this moment as well. Because if Clark delivers, if she performs at a high level consistently, then this warning becomes something else entirely. It becomes reality. But if the performance doesn't match the expectation, then the narrative shifts from confidence to question. And that's the risk of stepping into the spotlight this boldly. But it's also what makes it exciting, because moments like this create stakes, real stakes. The kind that turn regular games into must-watch events. The kind that keep fans coming back, waiting to see what happens next. And right now, everyone is waiting to see how the league responds, waiting to see how Clark performs. waiting to see if this moment becomes a turning point, or just another chapter in a much bigger story. Because one thing is certain, the next time she steps onto the court, it won't just be another game. It will be a response. At this point, the situation isn't just about one interview, it's about momentum. Because when a player like Caitlin Clark steps into the spotlight and delivers a message that resonates this strongly, it creates a ripple effect across the entire WNBA. And that ripple is still expanding. Because now, the conversation isn't just about what she said. It's about what it represents. In confidence, readiness, a shift in mindset. But more importantly, it's about timing. Because this moment is happening at a point where the league is already experiencing rapid growth. More fans, more media coverage, more attention than ever before. And when you combine that environment with a player willing to step forward and embrace the spotlight, you get something powerful, a defining moment. But with defining moments come expectations. And expectations change everything. Because now, every performance is being measured differently. Every game becomes a checkpoint. Is she delivering? Is she improving? Is she proving that the confidence was justified? And that constant evaluation creates pressure, not just on Clark, but on the entire league. Because now, the league itself is being watched more closely. How teams defend her, how officials manage physicality, how the game flows when attention is at its peak. All of it becomes part of the story. Meanwhile, something else is happening quietly. Rivalries are forming, not necessarily through direct conflict, but through contrast. Clark versus defenders, Clark versus veterans, Clark versus expectations. And those contrasts create tension. The kind of tension that makes games feel bigger than they actually are. Because fans aren't just watching for results anymore. They're watching for moments. Moments that confirm the narrative or challenge it. And that's what turns regular season games into events. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while Clark is at the center of this moment, she's not the only one affected by it. Other players are feeling it too. They're seeing the attention. They're seeing the headlines. They're seeing the narrative building around one player. And naturally, they respond. Not always publicly, but competitively. Because when one player receives that level of attention, others want to prove their own value, their own impact, their own place in the league. And that creates a chain reaction. More intensity in games, more competitive matchups, more players stepping up in big moments. Because everyone wants to be part of the conversation. And that's how the entire league benefits. Because attention doesn't stay in one place. It spreads. Across teams, across players, across storylines. And that's exactly what's happening now. The Clark narrative is driving engagement. But that engagement is lifting everything around it. And that's the key to growth. Not just having one star, but using that star to elevate the entire system. But here's the challenge. Because with growth comes scrutiny, and scrutiny changes how everything is viewed. Every foul becomes a discussion. Every call becomes a debate. Every interaction becomes a headline. Because when more people are watching, more people are analyzing. And that can create pressure on the league to manage things carefully, to maintain balance, to ensure fairness, to protect both the competitiveness and the integrity of the game. That's not easy, especially when the spotlight is this intense. But it's necessary, because the way this moment is handled will influence what comes next. Will the league continue to grow at this pace? Will the attention stay consistent? Will new stars emerge alongside Clark? These are the questions that matter now. Because moments like this don't last forever, unless they're built into something bigger. And that's where strategy comes in, because the league has an opportunity here, an opportunity to turn attention into long-term growth, to turn one player's rise into a movement, to build a system where multiple stars can thrive under the same spotlight. And that's the difference between a moment and an era. Meanwhile, Clark continues to move forward, game by game, performance by performance. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Not the interviews, not the headlines, not even the narrative, but the game itself and how she performs within it. But even as she focuses on that, the story continues to grow around her. Because once a player steps into this level of attention, there's no going back. Every move matters. Every moment counts. And every performance becomes part of a larger story. And that story is still being written, because this isn't the peak. It's the buildup, the beginning of something that could define the next phase of women's basketball. But to fully understand what this moment means, we need to look at one final piece, the future, and where all of this is heading next. At this point, the conversation is no longer just about what Caitlin Clark said, it's about what happens next, because once a statement like that enters the public space, it doesn't just disappear, it builds, it evolves, and most importantly, it sets expectations, big ones. Now, every game Clark plays is viewed through a different lens, not just as another performance, but as a response to her own words. Mine a response to the narrative that has grown around her. And that creates a unique kind of pressure, because it's not just about winning or losing anymore. It's about proving something. Proving that the confidence is real, that the mindset matches the moment, that the player behind the headlines can deliver when everything is focused on her. But here's the key detail. She's not the only one being tested. The entire WNBA is part of this moment, because how the league responds to a player like Clark and the attention she brings will shape its future. And that response is already happening. In subtle ways, in competitive ways, in strategic ways. Teams are adjusting. Game plans are becoming more focused. Defensive strategies are being refined. Matchups are being analyzed more deeply. Because stopping a player like Clark isn't just about defense, it's about making a statement. And in a competitive league, statements matter. They define respect. They establish hierarchy. They show who belongs at the top and who still has to earn it. So now, every opponent becomes part of the story. Every defender becomes a challenger. Every game becomes a test of whether Clark can maintain her level under increasing pressure. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because while the league is reacting to her, she's also influencing the league. Her presence is changing the pace of the game. More spacing, more perimeter shooting, more emphasis on offensive creativity. Because when a player introduces a style that captures attention, others start adapting. They start evolving. They start incorporating elements that match the energy of that style. And that's how the game grows. Through influence, through adaptation, through players pushing each other to new levels. And right now, Clark is part of that process. But influence isn't one-sided. Because as much as she's changing the game is changing her too. Every challenge she faces is shaping her development. Every defensive adjustment is forcing her to improve. Every intense matchup is building experience, and that's what turns talent into greatness. Not just success, but growth under pressure. Meanwhile, fans are more engaged than ever. Not just watching games, but following the narrative closely. Tracking performances, comparing stats, debating outcomes. Because now there's something at stake. Not just wins and losses, but reputation. Meant the idea of whether Clark can live up to everything she said and everything that's been said about her. And that creates a different kind of excitement, the kind that keeps people watching even when they don't support the same side, because they want to see what happens next. Will she dominate? Will she struggle? Will she adjust? Every possibility becomes part of the story, and that uncertainty is what makes sports so compelling. But here's the most important part of all. Because beyond the games, beyond the stats, beyond the narratives, there's a bigger shift happening, a shift in how players are viewed. In the past, athletes were often defined solely by performance. Points, wins, championships. But now, they're also defined by presence, by how they carry themselves, by how they communicate their mindset to the world. And Clark has stepped directly into that space. She's not just performing, she's representing a new generation of players who aren't afraid to speak with confidence, who understand the power of visibility, who embrace the spotlight instead of avoiding it. And that's a shift in itself, because it changes how the next generation approaches the game. It sets a new standard, a standard where players aren't just competing, they're leading. But with leadership comes responsibility, because once you step into that role, everything you do matters more. Every word, every action, every performance. And that's exactly where Clark is now, at the center of something bigger than just basketball, a moment where the game is evolving, where attention is expanding, where new possibilities are being created. But to truly understand what this moment means, we have to look at one final piece, the long-term impact, because this isn't just about today, it's about what this moment turns into tomorrow, at the end of it all. After the statement, the reactions, the debates, and the rising intensity. One thing becomes clear. This moment isn't just about Caitlin Clark, it's about change. Because what we're witnessing right now inside the WNBA is a shift. Not just in competition, but in identity. A shift in how players are viewed, how narratives are created, and how the game itself is experienced by fans around the world. For years, women's basketball has been building toward this point, growing steadily, developing talent, expanding its audience. But now, that growth is accelerating, faster than ever before. And moments like this are part of that acceleration, because when a player steps into the spotlight and speaks with confidence, it does more than create headlines. It sets a tone that says, this game is ready for more. More attention, more competition, more recognition, and Caitlin Clark represents that tone perfectly, not just because of her skill, but because of how she carries herself within the moment. She's not shrinking from the spotlight. She's stepping into it, fully. And that changes how the game is perceived, because confidence at that level doesn't just affect one player, it affects everyone watching. It raises expectations, for teammates, for opponents, for the league as a whole. And that's where things become truly interesting. Because now, the WNBA isn't just growing, it's evolving into something bigger. A league where stars are not only performing at a high level, but also shaping the narrative around the sport. And that narrative is powerful, because it influences everything: how games are covered, how players are marketed, how fans engage with the sport. And right now, that narrative is centered around intensity, confidence, and competition. But here's the key detail. Because while Clark has stepped into that narrative, she doesn't control it entirely. No single player does, because the league is full of talent. Players who have been competing at a high level for years. Players who have earned their respect through performance. Players who aren't going to step aside just because the spotlight has shifted. And that's what makes this moment so powerful, because it creates tension. Not negative tension, but competitive tension. The kind that pushes players to perform at their highest level. The kind that turns games into battles. The kind that makes every matchup feel meaningful. And that's exactly what fans want. They want to see competition. Real competition. Not just highlights, but moments where players challenge each other, where narratives are tested, where outcomes aren't predictable. And that's what this situation is building toward. A future where the league is defined not by one star, but by the competition between many. Where players like Clark bring attention, and others respond by elevating their own game. And that's how eras are created. Not through dominance alone, but through rivalry, through contrast, through the constant push and pull between players striving to prove themselves. And that's exactly where the WNBA is heading right now. Into an era defined by intensity, by personality, by players who aren't afraid to step forward and make their presence known. But here's the final piece of the puzzle, because beyond all the narratives, all the debates, all the attention, there's one thing that will ultimately define this moment: performance. Because in sports, everything comes back to the game. You can say anything, you can build any narrative, but in the end, you have to deliver. And that's what makes this moment so exciting. Because the stage is set, the expectations are clear, the spotlight is brighter than ever. Now it's about what happens next. Will Caitlin Clark rise to the level of everything she's said and everything that's been said about her? Will the league respond with even greater intensity? Will new stars emerge from the attention this moment has created? And these are the questions that will define the future. And the answers, they won't come from interviews. They won't come from headlines. They'll come from the court, from the games, from the performances that turn moments into history. And that's what we're all waiting for. Because right now, this isn't the conclusion, it's the beginning. The beginning of a new phase in women's basketball. A phase where confidence meets competition, where attention meets performance, and where every moment carries the potential to shape what comes next. And if this moment is any indication, the future of the game is going to be intense. So, what do you think about Caitlin Clark's message? Was it a confident statement from a rising superstar, or a bold warning that the entire league needs to take seriously? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now, because this is one debate that's just getting started. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the biggest stories in basketball. We're covering everything, from rising stars to major rivalries and game-changing moments. Share this video with your friends, and let's see who really understands what's happening beyond the headlines. Because in today's game, it's not just about playing basketball, it's about making a statement. Hashtag Caitlin Clark, hashtag WNBA, hashtag basketball. News hashtag sports debate, hashtag WNBA, news hashtag women in sports, hashtag basketball talk, hashtag viral. Sports hashtag sports, update hashtag game changer at WNBA, at NBA on NBC, at ESPN, at Bleacher Report, at SportsCenter.